la planète ne tourne plus, car Dieu ne nous croit plus, c'est foutu. Laissez-moi chanter une dernière fois la vie d'avant, tout ce que n'auront pas nos enfants. Ah, le ciel bleu, tout bleu, la montagne qui brille, touche un peu le lilas, tout lilas, et l'oiseau dans ses bras, le lever du soleil à l'horizon, sans fumée, sans poison, comme le monde était bon. S'il n'était pas trop tard pour sauver la terre, et si on avait encore le temps de respirer, serions-nous prêts à cesser de tout défaire? Y a-t-il encore des hommes pour aimer ceci? Le ciel bleu, tout bleu, la montagne qui lui touche un peu le courant, l'océan et la paix des champs. Le ciel bleu, tout bleu, la montagne qui lui touche un peu le lilas, du lilas, et l'oiseau dans ses bras, le lever du soleil à l'horizon, sans fumée, sans poison, comme le monde était bon.
Oh, it's just big bright lights, eh?
Alors, je vois que vous avez eu des belles petites conversations après le lunch. Alors, j'espère que vous continuez de discuter des belles répercussions, des beaux enjeux dont on a appris ce matin. Alors, bon retour au Forum Jeunesse de Vancouver sur l'environnement. Encore une fois, pour toutes les personnes qui viennent de se joindre à nous par Internet, je m'appelle Justin et je suis votre maître de cérémonie pour l'événement aujourd'hui. Cet après-midi, nous avons 2 présentations. La première est un panel auquel participeront de jeunes leaders et militants qui défendent les causes environnementales. There will be 2 presentations this afternoon. The first is a panel discussion with emerging youth leaders and activists involved in environmental issues. The second is a series of rapid-fire reports from the youth workshops summarizing the main ideas from their discussions earlier this morning. We encourage online participants to feed their reports back to us during this session so we can incorporate them into the upcoming afternoon talks. Webcast participants, just like before, can send questions and comments by following these steps. 1, click on Participate. 2, enter your email address. And 3, write your question in the space provided and send it to us. Alternatively, you can send your feedback to our dedicated email, forum150@experiencescanada.ca. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce, once again, Deborah Morrison, who will moderate this afternoon's panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. We had so many questions this morning and not enough time to answer them, so we're going to jump right in. I have 3 terrific panelists to introduce to you, and I'm going to do them one at a time and give them a chance to make some opening comments, and then we are going to open it up for questions. So, first, Meredith Adler est la directrice générale de Student Energy, un organisme sans but lucratif qui a pour but d'encourager les jeunes de partout dans le monde à s'engager pour un avenir sous le signe de l'énergie durable. Ladies and gentlemen, Meredith Adler.
Thank you.
just going to wander up here. So I have a few quick minutes prepared for you. And thank you very much to Deborah and Experiences Canada for having me. As she said, I'm Meredith Adler. I'm the Executive Director of Student Energy. So we're a global not-for-profit that works with university students around the world, creating the next generation of energy leaders who will accelerate our transition to a sustainable energy future. So I'll get into those buzzwords that I just threw out in a second. But first, Deborah had actually asked me to share a little bit about my story and why I'm so passionate about energy and youth specifically within the space of energy and energy solutions. So here we go with the spark notes quickly. When I was your age, when I was in high school, I had a lot of opportunities to spend time in Latin America, which was an awesome experience. Culminated in me living in Argentina for about a year, actually, where I got to study a lot of human rights and human rights issues. The history of Argentina is very deep and has a lot of various types of those issues within it. You can look it up for sure. But I left Argentina to go to UBC and do my undergrad, very, very committed to human rights issues and thinking very much about being a humanitarian, maybe working in refugee camps or on anything really that could have to do with human rights issues as we see them. And at the time, why I'm telling you this part of the story is I felt that the environment and human issues were very separate. I felt like you were either an environmental person who really cared about the trees and the extinct animals and all of those things, or you were like a human person. You cared about humans and healthcare and those types of things. And I didn't necessarily see them as exclusive. I would have told you that the environment was really important to me. But I also didn't see them as a united issue either. But luckily over the course of my university studies, I got to have a much broader perspective. I actually studied human geography, which is this funky little discipline where you look at power dynamics of everything, and I really came to realize that everything is interconnected. So you can't talk about health issues without talking about water quality. You can't talk about injustices without talking about the power dynamics of the policies at play. And so all this became really interesting to me, and I started to focus a lot on what are called wicked problems. So they are problems with constantly changing dynamics that are hard to solve. So when you think about wicked problems, often people bring up climate change. So climate change is something where the dynamics of the problem are constantly changing. Everybody needs to step up if we're going to do something about it. And nobody knows the exact perfect answer. And also we're running out of time. But we'll get to that part as well. So these are the types of things that I got really interested in, but still wasn't really sure where I wanted to go with that. Until a friend of mine just suggested that I should take this energy policy class. And I didn't know much about energy at the time, but I took the class, and my mind was totally blown. I was like, whoa, this is the one thing that ties together all of these other pieces that I was so passionate about. Because energy really plays into every aspect of our lives, all throughout the world. And so that was really where I landed in energy, is kind of seeing it as this big, wicked problem that really has a lot of solutions built within it as well. So fast forward a few years, and after I graduated, found my feet, I ended up working with an energy think tank. So I ended up doing a lot of work on energy policy and how you communicate about energy and make people care about energy. And while I liked that, it was also very high level. It was very much about working with politicians and other academics, people who were already kind of in the know, so to speak. But then luckily I came upon Student Energy. So Student Energy is where I work now. It's an amazing organization, and it really brings together all of these things that I care about with energy. So Student Energy, we're actually a global charity. We have about 40,000 students in 120 different countries that we count as part of our networks. But we were started right here in Canada, actually in Calgary, by university students who also were passionate about energy, but really wanted to dig into the future of energy. So they were students who were working in the energy industry in Calgary, going to school at the University of Calgary and saying that they felt really unsatisfied with where the world was going, and they also felt very unsatisfied with the fact that every time they felt like they wanted to ask a tough question about sustainability or carbon emissions, they were just kind of given a pat on the head and a seat at the kids' table and told, like, hey, we'll see you when you're 50 and can really make some decisions. So I'm not a big fan of that mentality, neither were they. So they decided to throw the first International Student Energy Summit. They had this idea that they would bring all of the big name speakers from across the world to Calgary. They'd bring students from all over the world, and they'd just have a summit where students got to say whatever it is that they wanted to say, ask all the questions that they wanted. So it ended up with some amazing speakers like Vicente Fox, past president of Mexico, Ralph Sims, one of the leads of the IPCC report, the big climate change report that spurred a lot of our work on climate change. All of these people are in the room. 40 countries were represented by 350 youth, and it was amazing. People were really inspired, they were really united, and it launched a ton of young energy entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs into the world. And so from that point on, we kept going. We kept iterating and creating new programs to get students engaged in the world of energy. Because what we've really found is that in the energy industry, what you have is a lot of stagnant players, a lot of people who have done things the way they've always done them, and they'll continue to do them this way. But if you look at climate change, if you look at any of our major issues happening in the world, they all have something to do with energy and how the energy system needs to shift. And the global perspective is really, really important, because it's not just about carbon emissions and reducing how much we drive and different things like that to avert climate change. It's also about the opportunity that energy gives people. So if you think about your daily life, if you think about how you got here on a bus, how I'm being projected with cameras right now, how you study at night via light, all of those things have to do with energy. And if you didn't have energy, you wouldn't have the opportunities you have. And you see that dramatically around the world. You see that students without access to energy don't do as well in school. Countries without stable electricity access don't have as high of GDPs. So we could go on and on about why this is such a crucial problem, but really what student energy wants to do is create a world that's sustainable and that we use our resources well in a way that doesn't adversely impact the climate, but also that's equitable, where everybody has access to energy to fulfill all their dreams of their daily lives, and that's not the thing that's holding them back from what they want to do in the world. So I'm sure I'm just about out of time. But what I really want to encourage you all to think about is the fact that youth are a key part of the solution to energy. Because, as I said, the industry is ripe for disruption across the board. It's in need of new ideas. And it's harder for older generations to have these new ideas because they didn't grow up in the digital age, whereas you all did. You all probably don't remember the first time you saw a computer because it happened at birth or something of that nature. And so when you think about your life, you actually have a real aptitude for innovation and for bringing new ideas to the table. And that's what we've seen a lot through student energy. So we have students who have gone from our conferences back to their communities in Uganda to create waste-to-energy projects where you collect waste from around your community, employ other youth to do that, and then end up with clean cooking stoves for people who formerly didn't have access to clean cooking, so their lungs were being impacted by their cooking fuel before. Here in Vancouver, I have a great friend who has started a company called Portable Electric, and it's because he was going to music festivals, seeing all these diesel generators being used to power what should be environmentally friendly events, and so he thought, well, this doesn't really work. Created battery packs that go on trailers paired with solar panels, so now you can have a carbon neutral event. So all of these things are things that are started by youth, and even up into big energy companies with multi-billion-dollar budgets, they need these ideas as well. And so it's really going to be youth innovation and youth who are learning to kind of play the game of business, play the game of government, to get in there, get their feet wet, and spark these new ideas, because we really don't have any time to waste in making an energy transition happen and making a sustainable energy transition happen. But it's very much our generation who has to stand up for that and who has to stand up and say, you know, these solutions, this, how we're doing it isn't good enough. We need new ideas. And here we have some, and we're ready to work with you on them. So that's what I'll leave you with on the idea of energy and what you could do with it.
Thanks very much, Meredith. Our next presenter is Jonah Bryson, who is a 17-year-old filmmaker and a real phenomenon in the industry. He made his first documentary 2 years ago. Yes, that would be at the age of 15, The Fight for Bala, which had the goal of educating people and informing people about a small community in Ontario's fight against a development project that was not just a menace to the natural environment, but also affecting traditional ways of life and the tourism industry in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jonah Bryson.
Do you know where Justin is? He has my notes.
Oh.
He took my notes.
Oh, your notes?
They were on the podium.
They were on the podium. Uh-oh. Jonah doesn't have his notes.
You took them?
Justin has a note.
Thank you. There we go. Hi, everyone. Salut tout le monde. First of all, let me just begin by saying how inspired I am to see so many young people. I'm about the same age, or right smack in the middle of the age range of people here today. So it's inspiring to see so many young people coming out to an event that's all about environmental issues. When we think about the environment, the planet, it's so immense, it's so outrageously ginormous and powerful that it can be hard to wrap our heads around how we as individuals can actually affect it. So today I want to share a couple stories with you, stories that changed my life. Growing up in the south of France, or near the south of France, I had the opportunity to go to the Mediterranean Sea during the summers with my family. And that's where my love affair with water began. I absolutely loved water. Water for me was home. Underwater, I felt so much more comfortable. You could soar, you could glide. There was no one there to judge you. And you were separated from the industrialized and corrupt life on land. You were separated from the narrow-minded. Underwater, I was free. I made some friends, little fish, hermit crabs. There was even a time recently when I went back to the south of France where I was alone in this little bay in the Mediterranean, and I was swimming, and I looked underwater, and there were a bunch of fish just looking at me. And I'd swim to the right, and they'd swim to the right, and then I'd swim to the left, and they'd swim to the left. Underwater, you can go on these beautiful, amazing adventures. It was paradise for me as a kid. So now that I'm a little older, I got my scuba diving certification so that I could go underwater deeper, further, for a longer period of time and explore the unknown. Underwater, I find peace like nowhere else. Sure, it's a little frightening when you're on the boat. You think, what if I encounter a great white, or what if my tank runs out of air? But the truth is our perception of the underwater world is quite different. Below the waves, you're in an innocent, magical world. There's nothing that really scares me underwater. I've met barracudas, I've met eels, I've met venomous lionfish, but what scares me underwater is not the venom of the lionfish or the size of the barracuda's teeth. It's what humans have actually done to, what is on the last slide? It's what humans have actually done to the natural underwater world, which is this. This is what actually scares me underwater. These are coral reefs in the Caribbean, dead ones. David Suzuki talked about this a little bit this morning, but when we pump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the oceans absorb that carbon dioxide and transform into carbonic acid, and that's a completely natural process. But now that we're releasing so much carbon dioxide, the oceans have to compensate for it. So when we release 40 billion tons of carbon dioxide each year, that, as you can imagine, makes the oceans quite a bit more acidic. They're now 30% more acidic than they were before the Industrial Revolution. And so why is it scary that it's killing all the reefs? It's because reefs are home to 25% of all marine life. And those are the creatures at the bottom of the food chain. And if they don't have a home, if they disappear, what could happen is absolutely devastating. The massive imbalance in the marine ecosystem. And why is that a concern for us? Because the oceans provide more than half of the air we breathe. They filter more of the oxygen that we breathe than trees do, to be honest. So if we have an unhealthy ocean, we're in big trouble. As my good friend Dr. Sylvia Earle often says, no blue, no green, no oceans, no life. But there's a lot that can be done, even by young people like ourselves. When I was 9, I got my first camera, and that changed my life. I absolutely loved filmmaking. I wanted to become a filmmaker. And when I was 11, I decided to create my first bigger project, which was a 1-hour remake of Alice in Wonderland called Jonah in Wonderland, and it took me a year to make. And so I know that sounds completely silly, but believe it or not, that film opened huge doors for me as a filmmaker when it caught the attention of one of Tim Burton's colleagues. And so since then, I've been seeing the impact that films can have, how they can change the way people see the world, how they can change society for the better. And so I set out to make films about issues that were important to me, environmental causes. I've had the chance of working with incredible people, including Fabien Cousteau, who's the grandson of Jacques Cousteau, and he himself is an explorer and producer, as well as Rob Stewart, who I'll talk about a little bit later, and who also recently sadly passed away scuba diving. Rob was someone that I admired so much as a kid. I absolutely loved his work, and I pounded him literally with emails constantly, asking, begging for an opportunity to work with him, until one day in 2014, he responded saying that I could come up to his cottage in Bala, Muskoka, which is in Ontario, and collaborate on a film with him. And so that's when we started working on The Fight for Bala, which is a film that we released with the Huffington Post. And so here I'm just going to show you a small clip of that film and then talk about it very briefly.
My name is Bill Perkis, and I'm from Bala. When I come down in the morning, I open the doors. Usually it's about 8 o'clock, and it's just glorious. The sun is just coming up over here. This is why I do this. I don't make a lot of money here, but I really do it because I love Bala.
It is a lovely, quaint community, all focused on waterfalls, and if you take that away, there's nothing left. Businesses, the community, all gone. We had a recent survey, 85% of the people in Bala do not want this. 41 out of 45 businesses do not want it. Why don't they? Because the project is too big for the land.
I mean, are we going to get, do we need more electricity? No, we don't. Is it going to mean cheaper electricity? No, it's going to mean more expensive electricity. So there just is no benefit to the town.
The province is actually in a net overproduction position. So we don't need the electricity.
The province actually pays the states to take electricity from Canada because it's generating more than it can use. It would be a money-losing operation. It's using provincial taxpayers' money to fund private developers. The environmental assessment process has been a farce. We bring up valid, fair, and relevant questions, and the government doesn't answer them. They just shoo us away.
And when you have a private corporation taking away public lands for their own profit, and none of it going back to the community, it's just wrong.
So as you can see, there's developers that want to destroy the Bala Falls, which is a place where First Nations portaged originally to get into the area. And they would destroy all the rocks, they would cut down all the trees, they would cut off this waterfall, this marine ecosystem to put in a power plant. It's truly devastating how corrupt politics are now becoming more powerful and are destroying our environment, which is what we need to survive. And so this project would completely destroy the town and destroy this magnificent landscape. But like I said, there's with all these things that are going on around the world, there's so much that can be done, even by young people like ourselves. And so what I want to talk to you about a little bit is to find what you love, to find what you really enjoy doing, to find your true passion, and to use that as a tool to make the world a better place. What Rob often talked to me about is that this generation has the greatest potential for individuals to become heroes. This is a generation of heroes because not only are we facing the greatest challenge that humans have ever faced, but we know how to solve it and we have the tools to solve it. Even young people can fight these causes. And so that's what I'm asking you, is to find what you love and to use that as a tool, whether you love law or mechanics or architecture, or for me it's film, or maybe you like music or acting. Whatever it is you like doing, use that as a tool to better the world. Last month I was in France and I was visiting my grandparents, and in my grandpa's basement there was an old article from 1934 that talked about climate change. It was talking about the melting glaciers, and it was talking about the changing weather patterns and how winters were becoming shorter and warmer. In 1934 they were already talking about this. So we're truly, truly way behind, but there's so much that can be done. My grandfather is someone that really inspires me a lot. He grew up during the Second World War, and mostly he had to live through the aftermath of that. And so at that time, you didn't have much. You didn't have a lot of money, but you really just didn't have much resources because of the war. And so you had to reuse everything. And still to this day, he lives by that mindset. Whether he recycles materials, so whether it's wood, metal, cables, broken wheelchairs, old street signs, whatever it may be, he finds a purpose for things that are broken, and he uses them to build new things. So instead of buying and throwing out and buying and throwing out, he'll just transform things. He recycles a lot. And all those little things are things that we all can do. So the truth is, in life, we all have to take some risks. We've all taken risks before, and I know I've taken some risks in the entertainment industry or environmentally, or maybe it's for that friend, someone that really inspires you, that motivates you, that really good friend that you try to get to know. We all have to take those risks. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But the important thing is that you tried. Happiness is too rare to ignore. So if something makes you happy, you have to go for it. And the important thing is that you try. In this situation, it's exactly the same thing. We have to try, because the true cost of not doing anything is our species as humans being in jeopardy. And I'm not being a radical when I say this. If we destroy our water, our air, and our soil, and therefore we can't have clean air, clean water, and food, we won't survive as a species. And so that's what I'm asking, is to find what you love and use that as a tool to make the world a better place. The world needs our generation to step up. You have to take that risk. And despite what people say left and right, it's a hoax, it's too late, blah, 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 don't give up. Stay true to who you are, stay true to your values, and never and know that it is never too late to make the world a better place. And start today by finding your passion and using that as a tool to make the world a better place. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jonah. Our last presenter is Yelmer Wenstab. Il est un sculpteur traditionnel et fier membre des Premières Nations de Cléquot. Il est également ancien coprésident du Conseil des jeunes de l'Assemblée des Premières Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, Yelmer Wenstab.
Clico, Uclasis Yelmer Wenstab, Uclasis Clispik, Histuxis Tlaoquet, Hayata Lakongan Hahutli, Clico Musquium Squamish Lewatut Hahutli Hatwi. My name is Yelmer Wenstab. My traditional name is Clispik. I come from the Tlaoquet First Nation on my father's side, and English and Norwegian on my mom's. I'm from the Tlaoquet First Nation, as well as obviously English and Norwegian, but I live in the Lekwungen territory, which is Victoria, where I'm studying at the University of Victoria doing my master's in visual arts. Previous to this, I was the co-chair of the National Assembly of First Nations Youth Council and the BC co-chair for the BC AFN Youth Council. And I'm really honored and humbled to be here, and really thankful for Musqueam and Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh hosting all of us here, even if we are from Victoria, remembering, that this is their traditional territory and their living territory as we're on. And that's where I relate to environment, where I relate to the world that we're in. We could stand here and have lots of conversations about environmental impact and global warming, and we could talk till our face goes blue. But we could also talk about ourselves as people and where we are as place. I'm very honored to be here. I'm very honored that I heard there was a welcome this morning from an elder. I was honored to meet a gentleman from Squamish who came and walked around with me with his son. Very humbled that we're on their territory. We're on their land. And around us, there's concrete, there's cars, there's buildings going up everywhere. Life is happening, it's busy. But we are on their traditional territory, and it's something to always remember. Our language, when I just spoke to you, I spoke to you in New Cholnath. My young brother, who's somewhere up behind those bright lights, which I can't see, he's learning our traditional language. And many say it's lost, it's going to be lost in the next generation, this is it, and we're losing our languages. But he's taking that on to learn his language, and he teaches it to me. So that introduction when I introduced myself was taught to me by my little brother. He's 13 now, And he is just light years beyond myself, light years beyond my family, my parents, and teaches us prayers and teaches us how to speak. And what he says is when you hear that language, no matter who you are, if you're First Nation or non, you have a connection to that place where that language comes from. Our language doesn't translate to English. It doesn't translate into French. I'm not quite sure what Deborah said about me when she introduced me. I hope it was all good. But our language doesn't translate into English because it has a feel to it. Our language has a place that connects you to where you are. The sounds of that language come from the water hitting the shore on a certain storm. They come from a certain sound of the wind blowing through the trees. They come from the sounds of life all around you. And so the language where I'm from, Tlaloquit, or as you may know it, Tofino, is going to be different than the language here. The sounds are different. The way the waves lap across the shore are different here. And the sounds that we hear and the sounds that we connect to our language are going to be different. But those sounds are changing all the time. And they're changing in some instances for the better and some instances for the worse. And we do have a changing world. It's in a huge transformation right now. And I don't need to speak to that because our two wonderful panelists did speak to that to some extent. And you've been doing this and you hear this research all the time. But it's changing who we are and it's changing our language. It's changing our relationship to a space. I was pretty scared to drive last night. I came from Ucluelet and I drove across the highway there off Tsawwassen and I got lost in a turnoff and I was totally lost in the rain. And I woke up this morning at 6 and I heard this huge storm going by. Holy cow, this huge windstorm. And so I got up because I wanted to see it. It was just amazing. And I looked out the window and it was just cars flying by the hotel room. And so our language has changed right there. You know, the relationship that I had to something was about a car going by instead of the wind going by the window. And the life is changing. And you guys are all in a huge generation of transformation. You really are. And you're doing it in such amazing ways. There are two panelists before speaking about that. But what's going to happen is we're going to have a different world. And we need to find a way to transform ourselves and to transform our cultures and who we are as people to this place. We really need to recognize that everywhere we are is someone's land before us. Kind of makes me laugh a little bit. Canada 150. Vancouver's done something kind of neat. They do Canada 150 plus. There's many, many years before, and there'll be many, many years to come. Nothing to put down, just to recognize we're a lot older than Canada 150. The country is maybe 150 years old, the name for the country maybe, but we've been here for a long time, and our languages root us to a certain place, and they relate us to home, and they relate us to the love of our family, and the love of that language and our culture. And we dance, and we sing songs, and we give prayers, and the elder, I'm sure, spoke in her language, and you hear that certain connection to a place. She is connected to here, and I'm not. I'm not connected to Vancouver. I have a relationship with it. I have my relationship to people in this place, but my connection is to home, is to my Nuu-chah-nulth language and to my Tlaloquit community. And all of you, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, have a connection to your place, wherever that may be. And I know, Meredith, you live here in Vancouver, and she has a connection to this place, and it is her home. And she has a relationship to those sounds. And she has a relationship to the world around her. And that's her culture and her tradition that's growing from this space. And little does she know, she has a relationship to Squamish and Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh. Even if it's not there every day, she has that relationship. And we need to just slow down. That's a really important thing to do, is to slow down and remember that we aren't the only people here. We aren't the only people. When we go, there'll be many more to come, and that's such a wonderful thing, and there's many more before us. And it's just how we relate to that world around us, how we relate to our space and our place, because we're all people of a place. I said I'm English and Norwegian on my mother's side, and I'm so proud of it. I am so proud of my culture and my community, that I have roots in Norway, that I can go there and I can find family and I can find connection to somewhere. But I belong at home. I belong with that language, and I belong with knowing the wind and knowing the waves and knowing when you don't go out in your boat and knowing when you do. Having a relationship to a place makes you love that place. Meredith said, everything is interconnected. And of course, there's a word for that. In every language, there's a relationship to say everything is one. Okay, try to repeat it back. He shook.
He shook.
Kissed.
Kiss.
Tsawwack.
Sawa.
He shook, kissed, Tsawwack.
He shook his sawa.
Well done. Now, it translates almost directly, but not really, to everything is one. Tsawwack means one. So everything is one. And what that means is everything's in a balance. So we'll start with the first thing before we can be one, is yourself. You have to look after yourself. We have another word, ESOC.
ESOC.
Now people say, oh, ESOC means respect. Simple as that, right? Word for word. But it doesn't. It means all these levels of respect you have to have. And so before I can care about the environment, and before I can go and be a warrior and be a supporter and be a savior, I have to care about myself. And that means many things. It means getting up in the morning, getting up with the sun and having a meal and having water and looking after yourself and having a shower and changing your clothes and looking after yourself. Just the most basic needs to care about yourself. And then you can care about those around you. Then you can care about your partner, or your person beside you, or your family, and that grows out into your community, and it grows out into your country that's only 150 years old. And that grows out further and further into an international scale because we're all connected, and we are. Everything that I'm going to do is going to affect my partner, Annika, or my mom and my brother and my father. Everything I do has an impact on everybody, but it also has an impact on that world. Try again. He shook his sawak.
He shook his sawa.
Now that's New Cholnath, for everything is one. And remember that, everything you do is one. And ESOC,
ESOC.
respect. You have to respect yourself. I was just telling Deborah, I was so blessed. I have a little baby girl. She's almost 3 months old, and I'm so lucky she's sitting up there in the back with her mom, Annika, and my mom and my little brother, and they're here to come and support. And when you see that little girl, you know, everything is one. It is so true. Just this pure innocence, this whole little bundle of purity that we're holding on to, that I'm lucky enough to hold on to. And each one of you, you know, you're that little bundle of purity. You're that little bundle of just pure strength and honor. And you carry your family behind you, even if you don't know it. And you carry your community. And the fact that you're here, you're doing that. And I'm so honored to see this work being done. But remember, everything is one. Everything you do has an impact on something else. But remember, everywhere you stand is also someone's. Everywhere you stand has a relationship to that land. There's a language, there's a feel. Just a feel. You know when you feel something? Or when you're standing there and you can know someone's looking at you and you have to turn around and see? There's a feel that's really there, and there's no words for it. There's no, simply, oh, that is this. Because it's a feel. It's a relationship you have to a place. And I can see papers moving. I think I must be almost out of time. But one thing I want to say is that we can really boil environment down to dollars and cents now, which isn't true. But we put a price tag on things. We put a relationship on things. And of course, institutions love doing that. Governments love doing that regardless of parties. They love to put a number sign on everything that we can relate to. But you don't put it on your love, do you? You don't put it on your love of your mom and dad or the love that I have for that baby. There's no number that can go to it. There's no balance you can strike. It's just that feeling. And that feeling is all around you. That environment is something that you create and something that you can do for positive or for negative. So one last time, he shook his sawak.
He shook his sawa.
And then thank you is kleko, kleko. Choo.
Kleko, kleko. Thanks very much, Yilmer. All right, we now have 20 minutes for questions. To make sure we've got more questions that are able to be asked, we're going to invite people again to come to the microphones, and we're going to bring you a little closer to the stage here so that we can have a better look at you. So I'd just ask our two young ambassadors to come and give themselves a spot here. And those of you with any questions, if you'd come down to the mic, that will make it a lot easier for us to take as many questions as possible. And I'd also, I'm going to invite a number of you to ask questions at the same time. You can ask them of one panelist or all of the panelists. We'll take 3 or 4 questions, and then we'll let the panels have a chance to respond to them. That way we can just get more questions in if possible. So let's start over here. And your name, please.
I'm Cabby. I'm from Mississauga, Ontario. And my question is kind of geared towards Meredith. I was just wondering, since you are in the science and technology and innovation side of environmental change, I was just wondering, what do you think is the biggest game changer that would shift towards environmental protection?
Okay, we're going to take a couple more questions, and then we'll let them have a chance to think about them. So.
My question is for Jonah, and you know how you talked about you got attention from one of Tim Burton's colleagues, and I was wondering, how did that help you in your filmmaking career?
Okay, 2 questions over here.
Hi, my name is Julie, and this is really towards anyone, but to you, what does it mean to be a Canadian?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sky, and this question is kind of directed at Meredith, and I was wondering what the best approach is for educating youth on energy literacy in Canada.
Okay, so we're going to let them have a chance to respond to these questions, and the rest of you just wait. We'll get back to you in a second. Jonah, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, first of all, Tim Ernst Collings, his name is Drew Lightfoot. I can never thank that guy enough. He mentored me for quite a while and still does today. I still speak with him once in a while. He just helped open doors for me in the industry. We talk about how it works. He'd help me get in touch with certain people, help me craft the stories for the films, and yeah, he was just kind of there as a mentor to help me as a filmmaker. And then there was another question about what it means to be Canadian. I hate to admit it, I'm not Canadian. I'm French and American, but I live in Toronto and I'm a permanent resident here in Canada. But in many ways, I do feel like I'm Canadian. It's such a welcoming place, and it's just it's proof that this country is evidence that we can all work together in a peaceful way and live together and breathe the same air and drink the same water and just be one while still being ourselves with different identities. We can work together, and it's kind of living proof of that, which I think is amazing.
Thanks, Jonah. Meredith, there were a couple of questions for you there.
Yeah, definitely. So there was the initial question on what's going to be the big game changer, I think was the question. And I think that that's a really interesting question. So the world of energy spans everything from the oil sands to electric vehicles to hyperloops. So there's lots of different answers to that question. And I could give you a lot of technical answers and a lot of policy-based answers. But really, I think that there's no one game changer. We need a suite of policies that will do things. We need a suite of technologies that will do things. What will be the game changer is for people to just get going. So I mentioned this a little bit about young entrepreneurs being really well positioned to change the energy system. And I really believe that because young people, it's actually a lot of what was talked about here in terms of community and knowing your sense of community and knowing your place and where you are. Only you actually know your experience and your lived experience the way that you know it. But you can also get informed about energy, you can get informed about all these other issues and use your sense of place and use what you know to make innovations that will work for you and your community. So what I mean by that is that there's tons of things. There's so many pieces of low-hanging fruit in terms of where climate needs to go. We don't necessarily need new technology. Eventually we do need new technology, but that's not the big thing. The big thing is for people to start believing in the possible and to start going with it and saying, our community needs this, our global community needs this energy transition. What can I see from my perspective that will change things, and how can I learn something that we'll start implementing, and how can I get my neighbor on board with the idea that an electric vehicle isn't so crazy, or how can I get my neighbor on board with the idea that, we shouldn't be demonizing other people, we should all be working together and moving this capital in the right direction rather than bickering about the little details. So that's really what the big game changer will be our generation stepping up and actually working together, because past generations haven't done that, and obviously it's not working. So get cozy, start networking, chat with your neighbors. That's what we got to do. And then to answer the other question that was posed quickly, energy literacy is really hard, and it's a term that probably half of you fell asleep when I just said energy literacy. It's something that's can be really dense and really boring, but it's super important to understand how these systems work because they impact so much of your life and because they're so complex. So Student Energy is taking a really good crack at it. We have a lot of online digital energy systems maps. It's all YouTube videos and short write-ups that explain the whole energy system. So if you want to know about energy, go to studentenergy.org. Highly encourage you to check it out. But actually, what I think the answer to that question is the same as the game changer question, is we don't do energy literacy based on here's some facts about solar panels, Jonah. Hope you really feel nicely about them after that. We actually go to youth across the world and we say, what it is that you need to know in order to be able to engage better. And we let youth tell us, and then we design programs based on that. So it's very much about you understanding what it is that you don't know and then seeking out the right resources. And I think the biggest thing is for people to start getting engaged in their community. So we have all kinds of programs that teach students how to like run their own panel events like this, or how to get their own solar panels installed, or anything like that, because it's about getting those practical skills to learn how these systems work. Anybody can memorize facts. People learning how to get stuff done is different.
Okay. Either one of you want to tackle the question about being Canadian?
I'm gonna let you go first.
Sure. There's a certain sense of pride, I think, that comes with coming from any country when that country holds itself well on an international scale. And a lot of the time, I think Canada does hold itself quite well. But there's a lot of history that needs to be known. There's a lot of truth that needs to be told. And I have a passport. In saying so, that means I'm a Canadian citizen to some extent. And I have a driver's license for the province of British Columbia, which in a sense says I'm a Canadian citizen. But I also have a status card. Hands up, who knows what a status card is? Not everyone, but that's okay. Status card is a number that is given that says I'm an Indian of Canada. My number is 66001338801. Hi. Most of the time, if it's a federal government organization that I'm talking to, I introduce myself with that number and don't give my name, because that number ties me to the state, in the sense that I'm a ward of the state. I'm an object owned by a country. I'm not a citizen of that country. Some people are going, what? And that's okay. It's not guilt I want anyone to carry, but it's a history that needs to be known, and it's a living history that's happening right now that needs to be known. I am proud of the country of Canada, but there's a lot of work to be done. And reconciliation is one step, but it's a step that's missed a few. They did a jump without all the steps in between. Truth and Reconciliation Commission was a really wonderful thing to get the truth out about what's happened, but there's so much more truth that hasn't been said yet. And the first thing we need to have before reconciliation is respect. Respect for each other, individuals. Not just respect for groups of people, but for individuals. And once we have that respect for each other, then we can go on. That first thing, ESOC. ESOC. We still need that. And Canada is a growing country. It's clearly a very young country. But there's a lot of history that goes before and a lot of history that will come. And so it's kind of on all of our shoulders to change that history and to know that history, not to just learn it for the bad, but learn it for the good as well. True.
Thanks so much. All right, so we're ready for some more questions.
Hi, my name is Lakita, and my question is to the whole panel. Indigenous people are finally being given significance in Canadian culture, but their beliefs towards environmentalism and sustainability and spiritualism and so on is not being well adapted amongst society. Why do you think that is?
Okay, we'll take a couple more questions.
Hi, my name's Astrid, and I'm from Edmonton, Alberta. My question was, since there has been a lot of discourse about this within governments and also in communities, how do you or what do you think the relationship is between innovating new technologies like wind farms and solar energy and hydroelectricity and maintaining like the beauty of the natural environment?
Okay, two over here.
Hi, my name is Victoria. I'm from Penticton, British Columbia. I would first like to say thank you to all of you, and Halmer especially, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. That is such a big issue, and I appreciate that very much. My question is actually directed towards you. We hear a lot about, respect and inclusivity with the First Nations community, and I think that that is such a vital part to environmental policy, environmental law. So when we talk about in our breakout sessions, including environmental law in our Constitution, I think there has to be some sort of, First Nations respect and something to do with incorporating your ideology of the 7-year generation and of thinking of the environment first within that Constitution. My question for you is, how do you think that we can make First Nations people part of the conversation in a bigger way when it comes to policy and law? Thank you.
Another question?
Hi, my name is Pramita, and my question is directed toward Meredith. So you mentioned how educating the youth and public is really key to improving the environment, obviously. And after some research, I discovered that it's actually mandated by the Supreme Court in India for every single one of their 1.3 million schools to educate their kids regarding the environment and sustainability. But why do you believe that is it in Canada, with all the resources and technology that we have at hand, we aren't putting in the necessary effort to include such material and studies in our public school systems? Thank you.
All right, so just before I turn to the panelists to answer those questions, we have an online one. Justin?
Yep.
This is for Mr. Wenstab from Jithan in Vaughan, Ontario. He asks, what part of First Nations ideology can be used the most by non-Indigenous people to make a difference in everyday lives and to make our everyday lives more positive?
Okay, so that's a lot to tackle. So who wants to try first? Yilmer, are you?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll try to answer all three at once, but before I do that, who's heard the word Indian? Who's heard the word Aboriginal? First Nation? Okay. Who's heard Nuu-chah-nulth before I said it? 1, 2, 3, 4. Not bad. Who's heard of Tla'aquit? Wow. Hey, good job. So I'm not really First Nation. I am, obviously, in the sense of the Canadian law, but I'm Nuu-chah-nulth. I'm Tla'aquit. And I can't speak on behalf of anyone else. In my role that I held with the Assembly of First Nations, I was the male co-chair for the National Youth Council for all of Canada, and that was something I really had to say. I can't speak on behalf of First Nation people or First Nation youth. I can speak on behalf of myself and my family and my ideology and my thoughts. And so when it comes to these conversations about First Nation people, we do have a certain relationship to land, and we do have a certain relationship to place, as I was speaking about. So we'll drop all these thoughts of Canada for a minute and thoughts of First Nation. Let's just think about our home where we grew up as a child. You know, we have a relationship to that place. Maybe you had your heights marked on the wall in the doorway with your brothers and sisters, or maybe you had that house, and maybe you still live in that house. Maybe you're lucky enough to still live in your childhood home, and you have a relationship to that space. You have a love of that space. You have a love of your home, and that's the relationship that needs to be found again, the love of where you are. Vancouver's not just a city, it is a place, and it's so many people's homes, and it's a place of tourism and a place of many things, but let's just leave all that behind and just go back to our home and our family, and we have that respect. And so to answer those questions, what are we looking for? We're looking for respect. In the path to reconciliation or in the path to relationships or a future moving forward, all we're looking for is respect amongst each other. And when we look at the environment, let's make it a living person for a minute. That environment wants respect, just like we do. And so if we go back home and we slow everything down for a little while, we leave all the kind of the big words behind, and we leave all the thought about government policy behind, and we just think about this country as our family home. What do we want for that home? We want love, and we want strength, and we want growth, and we want respect for our people and our families. And we need that through food, and we need it through the caring and warmth, and we need all those things that we need in that family home. We need it in our countries, and we need it amongst our families. And that's just what Canada is. It's just blowing it up bigger and bigger. And there's many groups that come into play in this. And First Nation are considered different. But we're not really. We're all people. We're all looking for that same thing. We all want respect, and we need it for each other to grow. True.
Thank you.
I think there's only one of those that I could answer, and that's the one about the green energy and how we maintain the natural beauty. I think a good example of where that really went wrong was with the Bala project that I was working on. It was a hydro power plant, but they were building it in the wrong place for the wrong reasons. Not because they wanted to, not because it was going to replace a coal factory, for example. It was still going to produce more power that we don't need, that we would sell as a loss to the US, for example, so we'd pay the US to take the electricity. So we don't even need it, there's no point. The only reason is really so that developers can make money off of it, and it was really in the wrong spot. These were traditional lands that people really, like you mentioned, like connect to. It was valuable, and so the idea that they would dynamite it and blow it up and cut down all the trees and cut off that waterfall is absolutely ridiculous. And so that's where it went wrong. I think you can definitely incorporate green energy and still maintain natural beauty. I mean, there's ways to harvest the sun's energy through windows, and like your window could be a solar panel, nobody could even notice it. Or you can put them on your roof, or you can put plants on your roofs. You can do so many things. You just have to be smart about it. You don't If it's done for the wrong reasons, it's going to destroy the environment and the beauty within the environment. But if it's done for the right reasons and people do think about it and how it's incorporated within that environment, I think you can definitely keep the natural beauty.
Awesome. So I'm going to take a stab at all three a little bit at once here. But in terms of this question around indigenous people's beliefs not being adapted, I think what Yelner is saying about how recognizing that it is not one blanket term, you can't say the indigenous people of the world believe this, because the indigenous people in Thailand are very different from Yelner or anyone else. So, but what I would actually say about that topic is that we tend to have this consequence of blanketing over people. And this comes into play a huge amount within energy development projects, is that we assume that like green energy is good, so let's just build that. Or we assume that, you know, this is bad, so we're not gonna do that. And it's never, none of these things are ever black and white. They're very nuanced. And it is actually about listening to people and actually about connecting with people, because there are these core things that we all care about, and that's what we want. And so I want energy because I don't like being freezing cold and I live in Canada, and so I need heating in my home. And I also enjoy connecting with people around the world, so I need internet and computers and all those things, because those are things that are fulfilling for me, and that's how I connect with my community. But we need to start talking to people on that level, on the level of their family, their friends, their children, and seeing what their needs are with that. And then there are always trade-offs within energy projects. You know, nobody's ever gonna be 100% happy with one thing, but really talking about what those trade-offs are and what our values are as Canadians and how we make those decisions is really important. So like, do we want ultimate convenience, or do we want ultimate green energy, or where are we on that cycle? And it's actually you and your generation who need to define that, and who need to say, you know, these are what's important to us, these are the values we have, this is what we want Canada to be as a unified force going forward, this is how I'm gonna respect my fellow community members, and these are the decisions that I'm gonna demand my government take into account when making these big decisions. Because it's never one way or the other, there's always trade-offs, but it is about respecting each other and making those trade-offs. And so then getting to this question of, you know, in India, for instance, there's mandated sustainability education. All over the world, there's mandated sustainability education in lots of places that you would find to be very surprising, probably. And then, so why not us? Why not us with all of our resources? Why don't we learn about this in school? And it's a matter of priorities. It's a matter of how we prioritize funding. It's a matter of how we prioritize education. And I can tell you that one of Student Energy's main pieces is that we try to create space for youth. So we try to work with energy companies, governments, schools, and try to say youth have a really good ideas and they need to be heard, and we need to find ways to help them implement these ideas. And none of those conversations are ever easy, and none of them kind of end up 100% where I would like them to be in terms of leveraging youth empowerment as a way to move forward. But it's another one of those things that as you envision what you want Canada to be, and somebody asks, you know, what does it mean to be Canadian? I feel like we're a little confused right now. We're not exactly sure if we're super ambitious or if we're just like the really friendly neighbor, or where we fit in this global dynamic. And so I think it's up to us to really define what that's gonna be. And as we do that, I would advocate that we do emphasize a more holistic education model that really looks at the environment and sustainability and lets people know about what their options are and where we can go. But it's a matter of prioritization. I was once on a panel actually with someone from Sweden, and we were talking about energy development and energy projects, much like that last question. And they said, well, how did you get everybody in Sweden to agree to all of these electric vehicle policies? And she said, well, in Sweden, everything is done by consensus, which means that not everybody always agrees, but every citizen can understand the policy and explain to you why Sweden made that decision, whether or not they agree with it. And all of the Canadians on the panel just started laughing, thinking about that actually happening in Canada, because it's not our cultural context. It's not how we normally make decisions. But moving forward in a more inclusive world, is that how we should make decisions? Should we try to educate people so that even if you don't agree with the decision, you understand it and you understand the trade-offs? I would say yes, but it's something that you'd have to fight for if that's what you want.
Thank you very much. Speaking of conversations not ending up where you want them to, unfortunately, we are going to have to close questions now and move on to the next session, which is really the most important one of the day. Justin.
Before we do that, though, I would like to invite Cabby, Catherine, and Jay to please come up to the stage and present our speakers with a little token of our appreciation. Give them 1 second to actually come up here. And I hope some of you have a little time to stick around later, because I feel like there's going to be an ask for some selfies, because, wow, so eloquent. Thank you very much. Cabby, Catherine, and Jay. And I guess I can tell Jonah now that I was actually just trying to steal his speech because it was so good. Pour notre dernière séance, nous aimerions offrir la possibilité de discuter de certaines idées et préoccupations qui ont été exprimées par les jeunes dans le cadre de notre événement aujourd'hui. Lors de chaque atelier, on a identifié une personne, et j'espère que vous l'avez fait, qui parlera au nom de votre groupe. Dans le but de gagner un peu de temps, certaines de ces personnes se trouvent déjà ici sur scène, ce qui n'est pas le cas. Alors, j'aimerais bien vous inviter à venir vous joindre à moi. Et les autres sont déjà prêts à parler au micro. Et les micros ont disparu. Alors, ces deux affaires-là, si vous voulez, ceux qui ont été choisis, those chosen by the groups, please come forward and let's begin this discussion. As they're coming down to join us, I'd like to mention that we've also received a few comments from online groups that I'll be talking and sharing later. But for those of us who are joining, I'd just like to say if you keep your presentation around 3 minutes, and then we'll be able to share everybody's feedback and have a fruitful discussion from there. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker. Please mention what group you're representing.
Hi, I'm Denise Lee. I'm currently 17 from Vancouver, BC, and I represent group number 3. We had a lot of discussions taking place at our group. One of the biggest things is access to nature. To start, I'm from Vancouver. 30 minutes away, I can go hiking in the mountains. I can swim in the ocean. I can stroll through the forest. But some people don't have that. There was a really big group, actually, from Kelowna here today, and we spoke a lot about the differences, even between this 3.5-hour drive, about what exactly it means to be in love with the environment, but to live in such different environments at the same time. For example, here in Vancouver, we have a pretty strong transit system. We can go almost anywhere in an hour, but that's not always the case. For those living in other cities, as I'm sure some of you can imagine, it's a bit harder to get around because every different area has different priorities. And that is an issue when it comes to the environment, because how exactly can you convince someone else living in a different area who maybe doesn't have the same experiences as you to commit to the environment as a priority? Here it's easy because we live in the environment. We're so connected to nature no matter where we go that it's easy for our mayor here to say, hey, we want to be the greenest city in the world by 2020. How can you say that to somebody living in Alberta who maybe has never seen the ocean? How can you say that to somebody on the other side of Canada, maybe up north where they've never seen our forests? So that is a really big issue that I want all of you to think about today, because we have to think holistically when it comes to the environment, when it comes to sustainability, because we have to work with the other factors, such as the economy, social causes, in order to make sure that we can make the environment a priority. And this is why intersectionality is one of the biggest issues that we were talking about. So I hope that's something that maybe sits in your mind today and even after. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Hernandez. I'm 16 years old and I'm from Vancouver, BC. I'm a part of Group 1, by the way. So one of the big things that we really talked about was the social changes that need to happen as well as with the environmental changes. So everyone, for the most part, has social media and that sort of stuff. That's how we kind of stay connected and everything like that. But we can actually use it as more of a device for change and to make the impact of environmental changes a more lasting thing. Because let's be real here, a lot of us are here and we're so inspired by all the speeches and everything like that, and we feel like really excited to make a difference, but most of us will just go home and forget everything that happened and just go on with the rest of our lives. Whereas if we use something like social media to make more of a lasting change, perhaps by posting more about environmental things that maybe you're passionate about, or just little things that you do around your house, that could be a big impact, and it could really be more of a lasting thing, especially if you keep seeing it on your feed, especially on Instagram and stuff like that. If you keep seeing that, it's a great reminder of what you can do and what is out there for all of us to do, and just little things like that, because as much as this is a big, huge thing that we can all take on, it's something that we're all going to need to do together. So by doing it as a collective group, it's going to have a much bigger impact. We also talked about how the federal government usually chooses a lot of the issues to take on, in a sense, in terms of provincial stuff, such as transit or different issues like that. And really, that can't really happen as much because provincial governments need to take more control of that, because issues in British Columbia are going to be different compared to issues in Alberta. And as a person from British Columbia, I can't really speak to all the issues in Alberta. So if provincial governments take more of a stand with those sort of environmental issues that are going on, they can do something that's more tailored towards the province, rather than me speaking from British Columbia having no idea of the impacts and the repercussions of what's going to happen with the environmental changes within Alberta. So it's kind of something for you guys to think about. Thank you.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Magali, j'ai 15 ans et je viens des îles de la Madeleine, c'est dans la province de Québec. Puis j'étais dans le groupe bilingue, le groupe numéro 9. Fait qu'une des choses qu'on a le plus parlé, c'est... On a commencé à parler des zones urbaines, de comment est-ce qu'on pouvait rendre les zones urbaines plus durables, en faisant du compost, en recyclant, en limitant le gaspillage. Il y a aussi un truc... Il y a quelqu'un qui a parlé de qu'est-ce qu'ils faisaient dans leur école. Ils se sont rendus compte que le transport, c'était vraiment quelque chose qui polluait beaucoup. Fait qu'eux autres, pour la Journée de la Terre, qu'est-ce qu'ils vont faire? C'est qu'à la place de prendre les autobus pour réduire leur empreinte écologique, ils restent à la maison, puis ils vont faire leur cours à la maison juste cette journée-là pour pouvoir... sensibiliser un petit peu les gens. Une autre chose qu'on a parlé, c'est qu'il y a des gens qui refusent de s'ouvrir les yeux face à ce que l'environnement change. Puis on a aussi parlé de l'urgence, qu'il fallait faire quelque chose parce que de plus en plus la qualité de l'air et de la terre et de la mer se détériore. Ça, c'est vraiment quelque chose d'important qu'on voulait partager. Puis une autre chose qu'on a beaucoup parlé, c'est les droits environnementaux dans la Constitution. Dans le fond, le droit d'avoir un environnement sain où vivre, de l'air sain où respirer, d'avoir la bonne eau à boire, puis d'avoir un accès quand même assez relativement facile à ces ressources-là. Fait que, et de petits gestes que chaque personne peut faire pour réduire son empreinte écologique. Fait que faut penser à ce que nous, comme personnes, on peut faire pour faire que le monde soit plus vert.
Hi, I'm Eva Cowley from Maple Ridge. I was representing Group 6. Et je vais essayer de parler en français aussi, mais je suis anglophone et je suis une personne française. Alors, okay. So our group focused mainly on trying to raise awareness and interest in environmental issues in people outside of these 800 or so youths outside of these 800 or so youths who are here today. So we spoke about starting education from a younger age, so instilling that kind of passion for the environment and for our Earth from elementary school levels instead of just trying to introduce it later on in life when we become more aware of social issues. Alors, on a commencé avec la grande idée de faire, de produire un peu plus d'intérêt avec les problèmes environnementaux d'un plus jeune âge parce que, enfin, si on les commence plus tard dans la vie, il y a moins d'efficacité avec commencer un intérêt dans les gens. Alors, on pensait de commencer dans l'école plus jeune. Another point that we discussed was the necessity of forceful action with the Constitution, so making the right to a clean environment and clean air and water more of a necessity in life, because if we don't use more forceful actions, people will not act unless they want to. So, donc, on parlait de la Constitution et la nécessité de faire des lois et de persuader des personnes de prendre l'action avec des actions plus fortes. We also spoke to solutions that we are doing in our own communities at home. So a lot of the people in Surrey, we found, were taking many actions, such as they were thinking of building a garden in one of the parking spaces at their school, sort of as a metaphor to represent replacing the use of cars and the dependence on harmful actions with something that is more eco-friendly, something that is more that will be better for the environment. They also are working on developing an app that is sort of a platform game that will help educate young children on how to how to dispose of green waste and compost, so showing them which foods are safe to compost and which are not. Alors, on parlait des solutions pour ce problème dans nos communautés et surtout en Surrey, et parlait de faire un petit jardin dans un espace de parking chez leur école. Alors, c'était comme un petit métaphore pour montrer comment utiliser des solutions plus éco pour remplacer des actions qui font mal à l'environnement, pardon pour mon français. Et ils ont aussi parlé de faire une petite application, et c'est un jeu pour montrer aux petits-enfants ou aux ados comment faire le compost et quelles nourritures sont bons et pas bons pour cette action. We finished off by basically just doing a summary that we need to raise awareness for not just awareness of the issues, but how to fix them and how to change your own personal lifestyle in your community and even at home, just by yourself, to take further steps to preserving our Earth and stopping or trying to reverse a little bit the climate change issues that we face today. Donc, on a fini par faire une sommaire de les actions qu'on doit faire pour faire plus d'un intérêt dans les problèmes de changement de climat et des actions qu'on doit faire pour préserver notre terre. Merci.
Good afternoon. My name is Tejashwar Sangha. I'm from École Panorama Secondary, that's in Surrey. So we had a great conversation. We started off with the issue of the entrenchment of, well, the rights of nature into the Canadian Constitution. So for those of you who may not know, entrenchment means that any rights, such as, let's say, human rights, would be part of the Constitution permanently. And if we were to change, for example, our current human rights in the Constitution, we would have to have a full-on referendum, such as, let's say, Brexit, which is quite a huge process, as you all know. Now, from this, the discussion moved towards what we've seen in the past couple days in the community with The First Nations people, they definitely follow the belief that they are part of nature and nature is part of them. Now, by that logic, there is no reason that nature should not have the same rights as us legally. Once we came to a consensus on this, we moved over to some facts. So by 2050, 70% of the world will be living in cities. The attraction of young people to cities could clearly be linked to commercialism and consumerism. Since it is so popular, I don't see much of a decline coming very soon, and I don't think there has to be a decline, but I think it does have to be smarter. Our group leader mentioned something about microplastics being used in a lot of cosmetics and soap and stuff. These type of products only sell because people buy them. People need to understand that if you don't buy a certain product, a company will stop producing that product. It really is that simple, and I think if people had a better idea of how businesses work and how corporations work, they'd better understand how to avoid getting manipulated by the system, in a sense. From there, the conversation moved over to what can somebody do personally. So, being somebody who volunteers a lot, I instantly recognize that the stuff that I've been learning since the beginning of high school, stuff like volunteering at City Hall, it's all about leadership. Now, leadership, in a sense, is just you need to make more leaders. A true leader is somebody who creates other leaders. If you can do something for yourself and stop using a certain soap that you know is damaging to the environment, that's great for yourself. Now, a lot of people think that's not going to do anything because it's only one person. Well, if you're a leader, you'll get other people to do it. And if you're a true leader, you'll make those other people into leaders. They will get other people to do it. It's not just one transfer of information. People keep talking. It's like a chain reaction. Now, from what our group leader said, I thought was very powerful, and I would like to end the conversation with this. We are not the leaders of tomorrow because we don't have to wait for tomorrow. We can be the leaders of today because we're the youth.
Good afternoon. I'm representing Group 2. My name is Lane North. I'm from Brockton School in Lynn Valley, and I turned 17 this weekend. So in Group 2, we were talking about how we all agreed unanimously that we should put clean air, clean water, clean soil into our Constitution, and that we should do this by protecting the environment and bringing on board new regulations, such as taxing carbon at a higher price. And while we were on that subject, we talked on how we're getting more extreme weather across the country. There's a couple of rivers in eastern Canada where they're opening the floodgates earlier than usual because of how much rainfall they've been getting and things like that. So one of the things I love about Canada that you might not know is that we have every ecosystem except for the tropical rainforest right here. You can go to the desert, to the tundra. We have temperate rainforests and deciduous. You can go pretty much anywhere and experience all that the world has to offer. Well, most of the ecosystem that the world has to offer. But if the temperature keeps rising, we could lose entire ecosystems. In eastern Canada, we have the deciduous forest, and here we have boreal and temperate. But the deciduous forest could apparently replace the boreal forest in British Columbia and completely destroy the local ecosystem. So because Canada is farther north, we're not as bad off as some other places, and that will move up to the Arctic Circle. But we could lose entire species, such as the polar bears, beluga whales, and they could be gone for good. So while we were talking about how we could solve these issues, we talked about how one of the main problems we have is consumerism and how much we consume. A lot of people might be able to compost or recycle items, but choose not to because of how much effort it takes. But if we do choose to be more efficient, use LED light bulbs, more efficient toilets, we can really make a difference. And if you use the natural resources the city has, like here in Vancouver, we get a lot of rainfall, but we don't use any of that rainfall that could be drinking water. It just all goes down to the sewers. If you collected it, we could have most of the city drinking off of that instead of building new dams higher up into British Columbia. So while we're on that subject, I don't know, how many of you guys here use LED lighting? Yeah, some of you? That's great. But LED lighting is, like, it's a really simple option that everyone could be doing to help the environment. If we keep doing things like that, we could make a big difference. And yeah, well, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rishi Dillon. I'm representing Ecole Panoramic Secondary as well as Group 10. So now we try to base our discussion mostly off of the question, so just to reiterate. The first question was stated, should environmental rights and the right to a healthy environment, should we create a constitution for that? Now in our group, our bottom line was that a right to life, a right to these natural resources, we need that right. If you don't have that right, you're going to wind up dead or with a society that isn't sustainable and that doesn't work out. With that, we decided that Justin Trudeau needed to maintain the promises that he made in Paris, as well as some of the other groups were discussing, to enforce a carbon tax. Now, this carbon tax should be able to enforce changes to not only regular citizens, which I'll get to that later, but also bigger corporations that are emitting bigger and bigger carbon footprints on today's communities and societies. Now, the thing with that is that we got into a little debate about that is, what about the regular people who are using their cars and who don't have a choice, who need to drop off their kids at soccer and hockey or just at school to get an education? We actually decided that for that carbon tax, it's returned, as I believe Felix was saying, in April. So for those just regular domestic users, their money that they've put into that carbon tax is given back to them, which I believe is absolutely, not detrimental, sorry, which is absolutely, it's just very important. I'll leave it at that. Adding on to the carbon tax, we believe that having that and actually making sure that that creates an impact on these corporations will slow the emissions down, because now they're actually losing something. It's not, we all know that sure, the environment might not be their number one concern, so making sure that they are losing money, they are losing profit, will slow them down. Another point that was brought up was the reducing plastic, and with that we thought that if people were more cognizant and they realize that some companies, especially that we're buying in our regular commercial stores, do overpackage things. And with that, I believe Jonah brought up how he was very scared just looking at coral reefs. And I actually had that opportunity to look at them, and it is very scary to think that something so beautiful and so natural has been brought down to nothing. It's just gray now. And that can also be included in stopping to buy things that have been overpackaged, that have been overprocessed. Moving on to the second question, we got into a pretty big debate about this because it was about supporting local agriculture. Now this was something important to us because we have students from all over BC and all over Canada, sorry. And especially since we have people from Penticton and Kelowna and places that are not as large as the city of Vancouver and Surrey. These people actually have the opportunity to support their local farmers. And we thought that not buying from bigger corporations, like I know we all love Costco pizza, but we're gonna have to leave it, I'm sorry. But leaving these bigger corporations and actually trying to buy from local farmers, that should be something that would help us, right? Something that I didn't even know about was that local agriculture doesn't work. And yes, we do get rid of the corporations, but the livestock is still there. And the animal agriculture, the fact that we still need to support these animals and the fact that we're still buying and consuming from them is one of the biggest cause of our carbon footprint. And that's about it. Thank you.
So my name's Isaac Grass. I'm from Borden, Ontario, and I'm 15 years old. So during the time that our group had to discuss all of these really important issues that surround the environment, the biggest one that we thought was the biggest challenge or kind of debate was the environmental rights and whether or not it should be clean air and water and safe food in a stable climate should be entrenched or embedded into the Canadian Constitution. We believed really strongly that it should be, but that it's going to be a lengthy process that might take a lot of time and effort. So in the meantime, we discussed what you could do as a person or as a community to continue efforts to make a environment that's clean and safe. So one of the things that we discussed is that you could go to someone within your community that is in the political process, and you could talk with them and not just take pictures with them and, you know, smile for the camera, but really suggest things that you think are going to help the environment, and really suggest what you think can really make an impact or a difference in the future. Another thing that we discussed was the carbon tax and whether or not it's working. We think it is working, and we think that we should be using the funds from a carbon tax and put that money into renewable energy, so that in the future we have good renewable energy for everybody to use. The last thing that we discussed was about, it was still on the carbon tax, but it was more about, should the everyday Canadian or the average person have to pay a carbon tax when they don't have a choice, that they have to drive somewhere and they have to use gas? So we think that there should be different levels of a carbon tax, so that a big corporation putting out a lot more carbon than the average person should pay more in a carbon tax than just the average person. So yeah, thanks.
Hello everyone, I'm Eric and I represent Group 4. Salut tout le monde. Today, Group 4, we talked about a lot on question 3 and 4, which is about what people are willing to do to reduce the impact of climate change in our community, and by 2050, 70% of the world will be living in cities, and what we should do about that. What we talked about was mostly about alternative solutions that we have for the future and for now. We talked a lot about solar panels for roofings. For example, Elon Musk's recently newly solar panels that he introduced that people could sell, and about how people should take transit or walk or turn off their lights, things like that, to reduce, to save electricity and energy. We've also talked about growing gardens within our schools and communities as well, to show people around the community what it really means to be sustainable and what things does on the environment and the impact it does. Quelque chose on pourra faire pour préserver l'énergie, diminuer le changement climatique et marcher ou faire du vélo quand vous pouvez aller à quelque place, ou prendre l'autobus et étendre la lumière, l'ordinateur, etc. Les idées ma groupe créé et renouvelables énergie comme les panneaux solaires sur les toits et les fenêtres dans la maison, ou utiliser les 3R, réduire, réutiliser et recycler, et utiliser et acheter juste les choses vous utilisez tout le temps, et arrêter d'acheter les choses inutiles. Merci. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, my name's Evan. I'm from Winnipeg and I'm representing Group 5. One thing we talked about was the cities and how more and more of the world's population is living in cities, and one way that we could use that sort of to our benefit to reduce the amount of non-renewable energy being produced would be just to look at all the high rises and sidewalks and stuff and just use those to create energy, like putting solar panels on all the tops of the buildings, or even on the sidewalks or roads. We also talked about how the government needs to create incentives for businesses to be sustainable. Like, for example, the government should be offering more and more reimbursements sort of for the amount of money that companies would be losing by switching to renewable ways of making their products, because like David Suzuki said, a company's job isn't really to protect the environment, it's to make money. And so the government kind of has to take the responsibility to make it fiscally sensible for businesses to do stuff like that. And we also talked about, like our youth ambassador mentioned, if you're like going to Starbucks every day and you're getting a cup and then you have to throw that cup out or whatever, you could reduce a huge amount of the waste and reduce your carbon footprint by just taking like a recyclable or a refillable bottle and just going to Starbucks and saying, hey, can you fill this up? Because that, over the course of the year, if you go every morning, that's reducing 365 plastic bottles that aren't going into a landfill and reducing methane and producing methane and CO2 emissions. So it's just tiny sacrifices like that that can really make a huge impact when you all act collectively just to reduce climate change and hopefully preserve the earth for a long time. Thanks.
Thank you so much to all 10 of you. As promised, we're going to take a few comments from online, and our comments come from our good friend Jithan, who asked the question earlier. So I'm going to share Jithan's comments coming to you live from Vaughan, Ontario. Jithan, I trust you're still watching. And Jithan suggests that the forum should have a social media campaign regarding the contents of what we talked about today. And this would engage other youth from around the country who didn't take part in the forum. Well, Jithan, I invite you to follow us on Instagram, among other mediums. And I invite also any of you to give us comments about our social media outreach and about the way we've been reaching out to various groups throughout this forum. Another comment, he says, is as far-fetched yet somewhat possible is a forum similar to the Energy Forum in Calgary that was brought up by Meredith, a forum for youth based off of the Paris Climate Summit that would show the governments of the world that youth really do care about the environment and that the youth see the environment as a priority. Well, being here today, I'm sure, and I am convinced that we see the environment as a priority. So bringing and making this forum more high profile, I do agree 100% with Jithan that would be a wonderful idea. Before I turn it back over to Deborah, I'd like to invite a special guest up. Rachel is from China and is an international student here in Surrey, and she'd like to share a few words.
Thank you. So, hi everyone, my name is Rachel, and I'm currently a grade 10 international student from at Panorama Ridge. I'm from China, so I guess I'm the only one international student here. Am I right? Oh yeah, that's nice. Wow, that's nice. So I'm extremely honored to be invited, to be part of this program, and I would like to representing all the international high school students wish Canada a wonderful birthday. And as I want to see, has been raised up in China, in a city called Kunming. There's a lot of children living in the rural areas. They don't even they cannot access to clean water, clean air. They don't have those opportunities. So now look at us. We're living in such a beautiful city, in one of the beautiful country in the world, and with a mass land of opportunities. So why don't we change, to improve this situation? So one of the example would be actually in Canada, I see a lot of people they just by seeing they want to protect the environment, but there's no actual action to that. And I would like to see this is the right time and the right place, and our generation can make the change. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wow, I cannot believe that has all happened all in the short amount of time that you guys have been together. It certainly should reassure Dr. Suzuki that his grandchildren have a lot to be hopeful for in the future, and I think it should make Meredith Adler very proud that there are definitely youth engaged, and proves her point that you've got tons of great ideas, and we just need to give you the tools and the opportunity to share them and put them to use and put them to work. So I'm sorry that our day has to end here, but I certainly know that the conversation will continue online. I encourage those of you that have been following to share your comments and feedback with us. And for those of you gathered today, to use social media and our hashtags to build the conversation and continue it forward as we continue with forums across the country. Right now, though, my most important job is to, again, thank our sponsors for their generous support. Our presenting national sponsor has made investments in protecting and enhancing the environment a priority for their community giving for over 30 years. Promoting education and community engagement is a cornerstone of their strategy. We're very proud to partner with them for Canada 150&Me. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Catherine Cook, Manager, Community Banking, Pacific Region for TD Bank Group. Catherine, would you like to come forward?
Huge congratulations. Give everyone a big round of applause for those presentations. I feel just totally wowed to have actually got to hear all of the work that you guys have been working on. It was fantastic. So hello everyone. I hope that you had an exceptionally great day sharing with each other, and also that you enjoyed, of course, David Suzuki's keynote address today. I'm so pleased to get to join you this afternoon as you wrap up this day filled with interesting conversations, the opportunity to connect with like-minded individuals, and the ability to build your skills and knowledge to continue to serve as the agents of change that we all need you to be. At TD, we are truly committed to making an impact in the communities where we work, live, and play. And that includes supporting forums, just such as this one, giving each and every one of you the chance to share with us through your creativity what is the greatest challenge or opportunity facing Canada for your generation. Canada's 150th birthday is the perfect opportunity to have this dialogue. We will celebrate what we've accomplished, reflect on what we have stood for, and focus on the progress that we still want to make moving forward. We need all of you to guide us, engage us, and each other so that we can start making that impact right away. As we all know, the world is a rapidly changing place. As we become more globally connected, our responsibilities to think about our impact more broadly also increases. Greater public awareness and community engagement is the first step in addressing some of the biggest challenges ahead of us, whether it's the environment, human rights, diversity and inclusion, or how we engage with the world through trade, business, or development. Building that awareness at an early age will ensure that Canadians, both at home and abroad, set a positive example for social responsibility and for building sustainable communities. Many of the challenges that we face at home and abroad also require new thinking and new perspectives, which is why it was so important that you have this role to play and that you took part in this forum. Our job is not to simply leave these problems for you to solve. That's really not fair. But we need to support you, and we need to provide opportunities through forums such as this one to help develop your networks, your leadership, and your critical thinking skills so that you can be more confident and bold in your thinking and empowered to know that small ideas and actions can lead to significant change. If I have one request, it's that you stay connected to those that you've met today. Keep in touch and encourage each other to continue on your path to make the change that you have set out to make. Thank you for allowing me to say these few closing remarks. Congratulations for your continued engagement, and happy 150th birthday, Canada.
Merci, Catherine. Alors, joignez-vous à moi encore une fois, s'il vous plaît, pour applaudir chaleureusement le groupe Banque TD, ainsi que notre haute commanditaire, Great West, la Fondation McCain, WestJet et bien sûr, Expérience Canada, qui ont tous contribué à rendre cette journée possible. Merci. So, I'm gonna put myself out on a limb here. I'm gonna try a joke. So, how do Prius owners drive? Slowly, not far. So they drive with one hand on the wheel and the other one patting themselves on the back. So you all can pat yourselves on the back for being here today and for making the change that you will be making in your communities. But, I know the joke's hilarious, but you're gonna have to just calm down a little bit, because I have two more things for you. First, earlier this afternoon, you received evaluation forms about today's event. They should be at your seats. For those of you participating online, a link to the evaluation survey will be posted at the end of this session and another one forwarded to your email. We would kindly ask, please fill them out. Our funders at the Department of Canadian Heritage, among other people, value your opinion and feedback in the programs they support. And your active input will help to ensure more youth-led programs and opportunities, as many of you suggested, like this one happen in the future, and that they continue to get better. Deuxièmement, nous avons besoin de votre aide afin de décider qui sera choisi pour se rendre à Ottawa. We have included a ballot for you to complete, voting for up to 3 on-site youth participants and 3 online youth participants that you would like to represent you in Ottawa. Vous pouvez voter pour vous-même, mais vous pouvez voter pour une personne qu'une seule fois. Alors, vous ne pouvez pas mettre votre nom 3 fois. Pour ceux qui participent en ligne, nous allons vous fournir un lien pour voter par Internet. So for those of you who didn't understand that last sentence in French, you can vote for yourself, but only vote for yourself once, please. Might I also add, for those of you who are at this forum today, I'd like to remind you that you also have an opportunity, not just from your participation today, but from your online participation at our following 3 forums, to be selected to go to Ottawa for the National Youth Forum at the end of June. The votes that you give us today, along with the input from educators, volunteers, and program staff involved in the forum, will determine the final selection of 37 national youth participants. We will notify you in the next 4 weeks if you are selected. Please complete both this survey, the evaluation form, and the ballot before you go, and we're going to collect them on your way out the door. I've got one more paragraph. Shh. Okay, I know you're getting all your friends' names right now, but let me do one more paragraph. Je souhaite simplement rappeler que les jeunes âgés de 14 à 19 ans ont encore 3 possibilités d'être sélectionnés pour se rendre à Ottawa, comme je viens de dire en anglais. Tout simplement en participant à l'un de nos forums jeunesse ou à tous qui auront lieu. Vous avez vos calendriers, vos iPhones, vos quoi que ce soit, à Montréal, mardi prochain, le 11 avril, à Halifax, le 16 mai, et à Winnipeg, le 25 mai. Tous ceux que j'ai rencontrés au cours de la journée aujourd'hui, I hope that you'll be online with us at those 3 forums, and I'll be reading your comments from the computer screen. Rendez-vous à expériencecanada.ca/150 pour connaître tous les détails concernant les conférenciers et les heures de diffusion en direct sur le web. Last thing, bus pickups. Those of you who came with your teachers, they have the information on the buses, so see them when you're done your surveys. Those of you who are here with the traveling program with Canada 150&Me, you have until 5 p.m. to visit the Science World, and then we will meet at the front for the buses. 5 p.m., please don't be late. Et c'est tout. Merci. Thank you so much for the day, guys, and have a wonderful ride home.